Fossil echini. Of this order of mollusca, numerous species occur both in a recent and fossil state. They are marine animals, having a body more or less round, covered with a crustaceous shell, and furnished with movable spines, the mouth being placed beneath. The crust or covering is composed of an immense number of plates, varying in form in different families, and in some species amounting to nearly 1,000 in one individual. It has numerous perforations, through which the tentaculae of the enclosed animal are protruded. These pores form bands, ambulacra, that divide the shell into segments, areae, the latter being more or less covered with tubercles, to which the spines are attached by strong ligaments. Upon the death of the animal, these ligaments undergo decomposition, and the spines almost constantly fall off, a circumstance that explains the cause of their being so seldom found in connection with the shell, in a fossil state. The mouth is armed with 5 or 6 triangular teeth. These animals feed upon crabs and the lesser kinds of shellfish, which they seize and convey to their mouth by means of the tentaculae, the spines being the instruments of motion. Various systematical arrangements of the echini have been formed by naturalists. That of Lesk, adopted by Mr. Parkinson, is followed in the subjoined description of the Sussex specimens. Sidaris, the turban. This family comprises those echini which are of an hemispherical, globular, or oval form, with avenues of pores diverging equally on all sides from the vent to the mouth, vent vertical, mouth central. 31. Sidaris saxatilis. Organic Remains, Volume 3, Plate 3, Figure 1. Hemispherical, depressed, with 10 porous ambulacra, and 2 rows of small, nearly equal tubercles, or papillae, on each area. This is a small species, seldom more than 0.7 inch in diameter. Localities: Bridgewick and South Street chalk pits, near Lewes. 32. Sidaris papillata. Organic Remains, Volume 3, Plate 1, Figure 9. Round, rather depressed, divided by undulating biporous ambulacra into 5 areae, each having 2 rows of tubercles disposed alternately, and surmounted by perforated papillae, encircled by a distinct groove at their base, the intermediate surface finely granulated. This beautiful fossil is well known to collectors. It is rather rare in Sussex. It occurs occasionally in the upper chalk, and impressions of its plates and spines are sometimes observable on the flints and pebbles of the seashore. The spines of this species are slender and delicately muricated. One of them is represented in Tablet 17, Figure 13. Localities: Upper Chalk, near Lewes and Brighton. 33. Sidaris conegi. Organic Remains, Volume 3, Tablet 1, Figure 10. Circular, much depressed, divided by porous ambulacra into 5 large and 5 small areae. The lesser divisions ornamented with 2 rows of tubercles, surmounted by imperforate papillae, generally 15 in each row. These are larger and more distant on the circumference or ambit of the shell than on the vertex and base. The larger areae have two sets of papillary tubercles extending from the vertex to the base, and also two short rows that arise at the vertex, but do not reach below the circumference of the shell. Hence, there are 30 rows of tubercles on the vertex, and but 20 on the base. This remarkable character is seen in every specimen that has been submitted to my notice, and distinguishes the present species from Sidaris mammillata, with which it corresponds in every other respect. The ambulacra are quadriporous on the vertex, but become biporous on the circumference and base. I have named this elegant species in honor of Charles Koenig, Esquire, of the British Museum. Localities: Upper Chalk, near Brighton and Lewes. Casts occur in the flints of the South Downs. 34. Sidaris corollaris, Tablet 17, Figure 2. This name is applied by Mr. Parkinson to a siliceous nucleus, molded in the cavity of a species of Sidaris variola, Echinosidaris of Koenig. Specimens are not unfrequent among the flints of the ploughed lands of the South Downs. Conulus, Echinopilium of Koenig, conical or oval, with porous ambulacra radiating from the summit to the base. Mouth central, vent situate in some part of the base or margin. 35. Conulus albogarlaris, Tablet 17, Figures 8, 20. Obscurely pentagonal, divided by 10 biporous ambulacra into 5 large and 5 very small areae. Surface covered with minute granulae. The vent placed on the margin. Vertex with 5 perforations. This species is very common in the Kentish chalkpits, but is seldom found in Sussex. Figure 8, a lateral view. Figure 20, the base of the same specimen. Localities: Upper Chalk, near Lewes. 36. Conulus albogarlaris, var acuta, Koenig. Tablet 17, Figures 16, 19. In this variety, the apex is acute. In other respects, it differs but little from the preceding. The specimen figured is a siliceous cast, of which Figure 16 is a profile, and Figure 19 a sketch of the base. Localities: Upper Chalk and ploughed lands near Lewes. 37. Conulus vulgaris, Organic Remains, Volume 3, Plate 2, Figure 3. The siliceous nucleus figured by Mr. Parkinson under this name is from Sussex, but it appears to have been too imperfect to admit of its characters being accurately defined. Locality: Upper Chalk, near Lewes. 38. Conulus subrotundus, Tablet 17, Figures 15, 18. Subglobose, divided by biporous ambulacra into 5 wide and 5 narrow areae. Mouth small, vent placed in the margin. This species is somewhat globular, the summit rounded and rather depressed, the base flat, the mouth circular, the vent elliptical and placed in the margin. The surface is studded with granulae. Figures 15, 18 are different views of a siliceous cast collected near Mount Caburn by my friend Thomas Woolger, Esquire. The shell itself has lately been discovered. Localities: Upper Chalk, near Lewis. Echinocoris, the helmet. Body vaulted or helmet-shaped. Base nearly flat, mouth and vent beneath and opposite. 39. Echinocoris scutatus. Organic Remains, Volume 3, Plate 2, Figure 4. Galeated with a prominent ridge extending from the vertex to the vent, surface granulated, divided into 5 small and 5 large areae by biporous ambulacra, base oval with the vent placed near the margin of its longest diameter, mouth transversely reniform, situate at the broadest extremity, with a ridge passing from it to the base. This species is found in great numbers in the vicinity of Lewis and Brighton, and siliceous casts deprived of their calcareous covering are very common among the flints of the Downs. The cavity of the shell is generally filled with chalk or flint, but in a few instances it is partly hollow, and its inner surface lined with transparent crystals of carbonate of lime. These, in all probability, have been formed by an infiltration of calcareous spar through the substance of the shell, subsequently to the mineralization of the latter. One specimen in my collection is particularly interesting. The shell, as usual, is converted into spathos calcareous spar, and about 1/4 of its cavity is occupied by pure black flint, the surface of which, together with the sides of the shell, are encrusted with rhombic crystals of carbonate of lime. Localities: Upper Chalk, throughout Sussex. Spatangus, body cordiform or ovate, vent lateral. 40. Spatangus cor anguinum, Organic Remains, Volume 3, Plate 3, Figures 11, 12. Cordiform, narrow extremity truncated, surface granulated, back convex, with 5 grooved quadriporous ambulacra, the 2 shorter ones extending obliquely towards the truncated extremity, and having a ridge between them, which passes to the vent. The 2 longer ones inclined towards the broader end, the 5th extending direct to the mouth and forming a deep groove along the back. Mouth transversely reniform, its lower margin but slightly produced, vent placed in the upper part of the truncated extremity. This species is too well known to require farther observation. Localities: abundant in the Upper Chalk throughout Sussex. 41. Spatangus rostratus, Tablet 17, Figures 10, 17. Cordiform, dorsal ridge rostrated, anterior part of the shell depressed. This species resembles the preceding, but the ridge which extends from the vertex to the vent is strongly produced, while the opposite side of the shell is considerably depressed. These characters are so constant that I have ventured to assume them as specific distinctions. Localities: Chalk Pits, near Brighton. 42. Spatangus planus. Tablet 17, Figures 9, 21. Ovate, vertex rather depressed, surface nearly smooth, with 8 biporous ambulacra, diverging in pairs on each side the back and front, dorsal groove superficial, smooth, extending to the mouth, base slightly convex, mouth transversely reniform, vent placed in the upper part of the side. This species is a rare production of the chalk and is distinguished by its ovate form and by the ambulacra not being grooved as in the two former species. Its surface, in some instances, is covered with minute and indistinct papillae, but generally appears perfectly smooth. Even the ambulacra are scarcely perceptible. It is therefore possible that a pair may extend to the dorsal groove, although none can be detected in that situation in the specimens in my possession. Figures 9, 21 are different views of the same specimen. A Spentangus nearly related to this species has very recently been discovered in the grey marl at Hamsey. The summit is depressed, the base slightly concave, and the dorsal groove rather more distinct than in S. planus. Locality: Lower Chalk, near Lewis. (43) Spentangus something. Tablet 17, figures 22, 23. This species is perfectly smooth, and no traces of ambulacra are perceptible. The mouth and vent are placed as in the preceding species, of which perhaps the present specimen may be the shell in a young state. Mr. Koenig informs me they are not unlike Spentangus prunella of Lamarck, except that the ambulacra are not visible. Figures 22, 23 are sketches of the same individual. I have seen no larger examples. Locality: Brighton, rather numerous in the upper chalk. Echinetal spines. It has already been mentioned that these are the instruments of motion and are fixed by ligaments to the tubercles or papillae of the crustaceous covering. Specimens in which they are still attached to the shell are very rare in a fossil state. The only example that has been discovered in Sussex is in the possession of Miss Rebecca Godley of Lewis. It is a Sidaris papillata, with 4 or 5 spines embedded in the surrounding chalk. The spines generally present considerable variety both in their forms and markings, but the following are the only species that have been observed in this district. 44. Clavated spines, tablet 17, figures 11, 14. These are delicately muricated. They belong to a species of Sidaris, to which Mr. Koenig has applied the name of C. claviger. Localities: Upper Chalk, near Lewis and Brighton. 45. Cucumarine spines, tablet 17, figures 12, 13. The elegant spine, figure 12, is well known to collectors and occurs in great perfection in the limestone of Calne in Wiltshire. It belongs to Sidaris septrifera of Koenig. The other specimen, figure 13, has previously been described as the spine of Sidaris papillata. Locality: Upper Chalk, near Lewis. Testaceae, univalves, 46. Cirrus perspectivus, tablet 18, figures 12, 21. Obtusely conical, volutions convex, transversely ovate, spirally striated, umbilicus deep, exposing 1/3 of the volutions, aperture transversely oblong. The umbilicus of this species resembles in structure that of the celebrated staircase shell, Trochus perspectivus of Linné, exposing the inner edge of the volutions to the extent of nearly 1/3 of their width. The volutions are 6 or 7 in number, convex externally, smooth in the casts, but where portions of the shell remain, marked with fine spiral striae. The specimens are seldom more than chalky casts, vestiges of the shell itself being exceedingly rare. A few examples have, however, been noticed, in which the casts are covered with a nacreous pellicle, the remains of the internal pearly coat of the original. Tablet 18, figure 12, represents the most perfect specimen in my possession. A portion of the original shell is attached to one of the volutions. This species sometimes attains 2 inches and a half in height and 4 inches in diameter. Tablet 18, figure 21, view of an interesting example of the base exhibiting the structure of the umbilicus. Localities, upper and lower chalk of the South Downs, rare in the latter deposit. (47) Cirrus depressus, Tablet 18, figures 18, 22, spire depressed. Volutions transversely ovate, spirally striated, aperture umbilicus. This shell might be referred to the genus Uomphalus of Sowerby, but is so clearly related to the preceding species that I cannot hesitate to retain its present appropriation. It differs from C. perspectivus in the spire being scarcely elevated above the margin of the outer volution. The umbilicus must consequently be very shallow. In a large specimen in my collection, the width of the base is 3.5 inches, while the height of the shell is 1.3 inch. Some allowance, it is true, may be made for the effects of compression, but the circumstance is too constant to be the result of accident. The form of the aperture and the structure of the umbilicus are at present unknown. Tablet 18, figure 18, represents the appearance of a specimen viewed from above. Tablet 18, figure 22, a perspective view of another example. Locality, Upper Chalk, near Lewis. 48. Cirrus granulatus, conical, volutions 5 or 6, obscurely quadrangular, ornamented with regular, transverse, granulated striae. Umbilicus. I have but very recently discovered this elegant shell, and only 4 imperfect casts are at present known. Its characters are, however, sufficiently defined to identify the species. The volutions are depressed on the upper and under surface, and broad and slightly convex on the outer margin. The form of the inner edge is unknown. The striae are about 15 on each volution, very regular, and elegantly granulated, or moniliform. No traces of the shell remains. Locality, Lower Chalk, near Lewis. (49) Cast of a species of Dolium. The fossil here alluded to is the cast of a ventricospiral univalve, consisting of 3 volutions. It is nearly 7 inches long and 5 in circumference. The body is ventricose, the surface smooth, the aperture oblong, extending the entire length of the last volution. The spire is very small and depressed obliquely. This specimen contains not the slightest remains of the shell, and is so much distorted as to prevent the possibility of its generic characters being determined. In its general form, it bears some resemblance to the auricula represented in Tablet 19, figure 34, but is still more nearly related to the siliceous cast of a Buckingham from St. Peter's Mountain, figured by Fogus St. Fond. Histoire naturelle Mont Saint-Pierre, plate 30, figure 1a. It seems, however, more probable that the recent shell may have belonged to the genus Dolium of Lamarck. Locality, Clayton Chalk Pit, collected by and in the possession of Richard Weeks, Esquire, of Hurstpurpoint. 50. Vermicularia umbonata? Imperfect examples of a species related to V. umbonata are sometimes found in the vicinity of Lewis. The spire is composed of 3 or 4 contiguous volutions, the outer one being produced in a curved form. 51. Vermicularia. Masses composed of a smooth cylindrical shell, much convoluted or intertwined, are of frequent occurrence in the chalk at Brighton. The propriety of placing them in the present genus cannot, however, be determined till the discovery of more perfect specimens. 52. Serpula. The remains of a species of Serpula are very common on the shells of the Echini, Inocerami, etc. 53. Nautilus elegans. See Gray Marl Fossils, number 27. Examples of this species, with the undulating markings but faintly expressed, are occasionally found in the chalk. Perfectly smooth casts also occur, and these are probably referable to the same, the striae being effaced by accident. Locality, Upper Chalk, near Lewis. 54. Ammonites varians, Gray Marl Fossils, number 30. A few examples have been found in the Lower Chalk, near Lewis. 55. Ammonites vulgari, tablet 21, figure 16, tablet 22, figure 7. Discoidal, depressed, volutions 1/3 inserted, transversely costated, costae remote, slightly curved, inclined towards the aperture, terminating on the outer margin in compressed tubercles or spinous projections, carene acute, deeply serrated. The volutions are generally 3 or 4 in number, rather depressed, and ornamented with transverse ribs that terminate on the outer margin in carenated tubercles, which are elongated into spinous projections in the adult shell, as in figure 16, tablet 21. In some examples, there are 2 tubercles on the outer extremity of each rib, and 1 on the inner margin. The carene is acute and deeply serrated, the projections being almost angular. This elegant ammonite is a rare production of the Lower Chalk. It varies in size from 0.5 inch to 4 or 5 inches in diameter, and is easily identified by the serrated keel and the form and disposition of the ribs and tubercles. I have named it in honor of my esteemed friend, Thomas Woolger, Esquire of Lewis, a gentleman whose taste for science leads him to patronize every attempt to elucidate the natural history and topography of his native town. Footnote. Since this was written, my lamented friend is no more, but I feel a melancholy pleasure in paying this humble tribute to his memory. For many years he had been ardently engaged in forming a collection of drawings and manuscripts illustrative of the topography of the southeastern part of Sussex, with a view to publication, but a long and painful illness prevented the accomplishment of his wishes. To the future historian of Sussex, his labors cannot fail to afford material assistance, and his name will be associated by posterity with those of Rowe, Burrell, Hay, Dalloway, and others, whose researches have laid the foundation of the history of this former kingdom of the South Saxons. It is to be hoped that his son, John Webb Woolger, Esquire, M.A.S., whose scientific attainments are worthy of such a parent, will be induced to favor the public with the result of his father's investigations. Tablet 21, Figure 16. A cast of the adult shell with its spinous projections. A small specimen of Coenites subrotundus is attached to the inner volutions. It is scarcely necessary to observe that the chalk ammonites and other multilocular testicae very rarely contain any remains of their shelly covering. Tablet 22, Figure 7, a cast of the young shell. Locality, Lower Chalk, near Lewes.